Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome to the meeting. I've got some housekeeping to give you. Fire evacuation procedures. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if an alarm does sound, we'll evacuate the building immediately. Fire exits just behind us, opposite the windows, and we go through reception and meet in War Memorial Park. This meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view repeatedly on YouTube after the meeting. With the microphones, just to make sure you're heard clearly, you need to be relatively close to the microphone and the arm can be moved so as to face your mouth. Please make sure your mobile phones are either on silent or switched off. Thank you very much indeed. Being as there are several new faces, and this is my first time as chairing the meeting, I was hoping we could all introduce ourselves, if that's okay. So I've just taken over from Verity Maricane as chair of the committee. I'm currently a teacher, and after spending 30 years in broadcasting, and I've lived in Basingstoke since 1991. So it's very exciting for me to be doing this role. Anne, shall I get you to introduce yourself? And we're delighted to have you, and thank you very much indeed. David?
Hi, so I'm David McIntyre. I am a Borough Councillor for the ward of Sherburn St John and Rookstown. Year 2, so that's 2 years down. And yeah, this is my first turnabout on standards.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Jo Slimin. I'm also a Borough Councillor representing Tadley and Pamba. I'm also a Tadley Town Councillor for the last 41 years. And I've been on this committee since it onset, except for one brief period when I became a Borough Councillor and left as the parish representative, and then went as the Borough representative, then lost my seat and went back as the parish representative, and now I've come back as the Borough representative, and I was the Vice Chair last year. Thank you.
Hi, Francesca Maritan Hawkins. I'm a parish councillor from Old Basing and Lichpit Parish Council. I think I'm coming up to 1 year on this. Yay!
Hello, I'm Ian Elkins. I'm from Overton Parish Council, and this is my second meeting.
Amanda Povey, it's my first meeting, independent assessor. I'm a careers advisor and support adults with learning difficulties.
Sylvia Goddard, this is my first meeting, independent standards assessor, and I've lived in Basingstoke all my life, which is many, many years.
Hi, I'm Phil Matthews. I'm the Assistant Democratic Services Officer, so I prepare the agenda and do the minutes and operate the webcast.
Thanks ever so much, Phil, and thank you for rearranging the meetings and everything to accommodate all the elections and other hard work you've had to do. I think the next thing on the agenda is apologies. I've got one apology from Martin Slatford. Are there any other apologies that we've been notified of? Not that we're aware of. Okay, fantastic, thank you. So the next item is, I'm afraid, for borough councillors only, and it's the nomination of a vice chair for the committee. Do we have a nominee?
So I'm happy to nominate Councillor Slimin for Vice Chair.
Councillor Slimin, are you happy to be nominated?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you.
I think we declare that as an election. Thank you very much. Jo, if you want to, you can move over to this seat or you can stay where you are.
I think I'll remain where I am, otherwise it disrupts the whole meeting. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Item number 3 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Does anyone have anything they need to declare? Thank you. And item number 4, urgent matters. Are we aware of any urgent matters to be raised? No. Thank you. Item number 5 are minutes of the last meeting and approving the minutes of the last meeting. There weren't that many of us who were at the last meeting, but are those of us who were or have subsequently watched it on YouTube, are we happy?
I was at the meeting and I'm happy with the minutes.
I was at the meeting and I'm happy with the minutes.
Fantastic. So I move that we accept those minutes, and I will sign the paper now. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So next it's item 6, which is the Code of Conduct Learning and Development Programme report. And we're very grateful that Anne is stepping into Fiona's shoes to give us this report. Thank you, Anne.
For the new members of the committee, we've tried to get together a programme on Code of Conduct and to disseminate it quite widely. So for the first time, we're trying to capture parish councillors, particularly with a view to improving standards of conduct throughout the borough. So you have the report before you, which is an update on where we're at. In relation to the new Code of Conduct, so we adopted a new Code of Conduct in 2022, and we are trying to encourage all parish councils to take up the new Code of Conduct rather than their former codes of conduct, because there is a mix of Code of Conducts around. Some of them were the NALC code, which isn't the best. Some of them were variations on that. So as of this meeting, there are 32 parishes out of 42 have actually adopted the new code. So that's just 10 more to get on board. And then paragraph 2.2 deals with the training that we've provided to the parishes on the new Code of Conduct. So we've done 2 online sessions with parish councillors, and on request from a couple of parish councils, Fiona and I went and did 3 in-person sessions at their parish halls. So we reckon that we've trained approximately 70 parish and town councillors on the new code, and we've also trained 19 parish and town clerks at the same time. So for the borough councillors, we've done 2 training sessions this year. 23 borough councillors attended. We also did the Code of Conduct at an induction session for newly elected borough councillors, and into their induction pack was a nice little reminder for the 16th of September version if they didn't come to the first one. We're also asking them to complete the Local Government Association's e-learning on the Code of Conduct, and in fact we've organised one further session after the September one, which will be in November, so we hope to have picked up most councillors by then. We're also in the process of arranging further meetings with parish and town clerks in September, and we're aiming this at town clerks rather than borough councillors to give them some education, and we're hoping to include, in fact we are including, a session on UK GDPR, and also a session on freedom of information requests and subject access requests, which they will get plenty of. And we will also do a review of complaints that we've had so that they can get some lessons learnt from our complaints. And then finally, we're having 2 virtual training sessions on the Code of Conduct for parish and town councillors, and I think the dates have been arranged. I think it's the 16th rather than the 18th of September and the 15th of October. We've notified parish clerks of those sessions and also sent them the LGA link to the e-learning module for their councillors if they're unable to attend one of our sessions. So all the training that we do is in fact discretionary. There's no obligation on the council to provide any training for parishes. Obviously we have an obligation to train our own councillors, but happy to answer any questions on the report.
Thanks very much, Anne. Francesca.
Thank you for the very positive report, actually, compared with where we were the last time round. The numbers are good, 70 parish and town councillors. How does that compare with the total? Is that roughly half, 3/4?
Contact every clerk to find out how many parish councillors they've got, because of course they, you have big parishes and very small, so I don't know exactly what percentage of that we've managed to do. What I can tell you is, from having done a little bit of research today, NALC, the National Association of Local Councils, do provide their own training courses, but they're about £80–90 a hit, so we're obviously providing something free, and that's probably why we've had a fairly good take-up.
Thank you. Ian? Hi, thank you.
Does the online training have provision for the people who take it to complete a certificate to say they've done it, because then you'd have a record of who'd done it online?
I must admit, I haven't actually tried it myself or seen the quality of it, but I would imagine it probably does. They generally do, don't they? So, and then the clerk can be reassured that her councillors have done it, or his councillors have done it.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions or observations? Jo?
Yeah, I think it's a positive move. At least we've moved forward. We have struggled getting our parish councillors to take the matter seriously, and I'm still quite concerned that we've got 10 parishes who haven't adopted the code of conduct, because if we have any cases it becomes extremely difficult for us to actually deal with it, because we have to look at whatever code of conduct they have adopted, which is probably different than the one that we're expecting. And that has caused difficulties in the past, because it may not be the latest version and some things are excluded if it's a really old version. It is much better if everybody has the same level playing field and we all are talking about the same thing. So those 10 possibly need to encourage to join the club, if you like. I certainly think that the way that the code of conduct is now thought of is much more positive than it used to be. When it first got introduced, everybody thought it was, especially at the parish level, that it was really quite an extra step that wasn't anything to do with them. But I think over the years they now see that there are protections for them as well as advantages in being able to make a complaint, or somebody, it protects you if you have had a complaint because it's being dealt with properly. And of course, I'm telling the parish council something they already know. As a town councillor for forever, it is a different scenario than being a borough councillor, because you are more closely involved with your population, and very often it's quite difficult because there's personalities involved, and the local councillors themselves sometimes get more embroiled in the personal issues rather than anything else. So I think it is a really good safety net for councillors who become parish and town councillors, to make sure that they have got that protection that we can give them from undue or unsolicited complaints.
Thanks very much, Jo. Sylvia? Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you for the report. Do we know what stops the other 10 parishes from participating? I know they don't have to, and they may have their own policies and procedures in place, but do they give any indication of why they're reluctant to adopt ours?
I don't know. I suspect it's more that they just haven't responded. So maybe we'll have another go at the last 10 and just see if we can get some information as to why they haven't, or whether or not they'd like us to come and speak to them about it, perhaps.
Ian?
I think we do have some locus to sort of apply a little bit of pressure, don't we? Because obviously they come under this board. Could we not just write to them and say, do you accept it, or do you adhere to the 2022 policy? do you propose to adopt it? And if not, could you give us a copy of what your conduct policy is instead? Because obviously it's something we need to take into account should we get a complaint. If we could just send a letter to the clerks.
We could certainly write to the clerks. We can't force them to adopt the new code, but I think what we can do usefully is point out that there is the benefit of the guidance that goes with the code, which is really, really useful if you find yourself in a complaint situation. So we will do that and just see whether we can pick up the remaining ones. They're also meant to put their code of conduct on their website, so we can ask them. Not all parish councils do, but they should really have it on their website, which makes complaints easier.
Thank you very much. That's really useful exchange. Any other questions or observations? Thank you. So I think we've noted that it's difficult to deal with the parish councils which haven't signed up to the Code of Conduct, and that because of that, the 10 outstanding parish councils will be written to point this out. And that I think we've all noted that there's been a great deal of progress, and that Anne and colleagues have clearly worked very hard in getting loads more parish councillors trained, and all the other councillors as well. So thank you. So I suggest that we note this report. Is the committee happy to note it? Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is item 7. Recruitment of independent standards assessors update. And again, we turn to you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm pleased to report that we now have a full house. This report deals with the outcome of the recruitment process, and we welcome the new members to the committee. Over the last year, we had 2 recruitment campaigns for vacancies for both IPs and ISAs. And at the time of the last committee meeting in March, there were 2 ISA vacancies to fill, and interviews took place on the 18th of March and the 5th of April respectively. The report sets out who the panel was. I think I sat on one, Fiona sat on the other, and we were pleased to recommend to Council that Sylvia and Amanda fulfil the ISA roles. 2.4 gives the period for which you're appointed, so it's a period of 2 years plus an extension of a further 2 years if that's agreed later. So at 3.1 you've got the table that sets out the date everybody was appointed, so you've got the independent persons who of course don't sit on this committee, and the ISAs, the date that their term expires, and whether or not a 2-year extension has been implemented. Happy to take any questions.
Go on, Ian.
There appears to be just a slight inconsistency in the report, if I can just find it, because of course at paragraph 8 it says there are currently sufficient IPs and ISAs to be able to advise if there were to be a significant increase in the number of complaints. And then further on, it says it recommends that a further recruitment exercise be undertaken to increase the number of ISAs. And I'm not quite sure why that would be the case if there's already sufficient resilience.
I wonder if that's looking forward, perhaps.
Yeah, there's no date on it. So the risk assessment, paragraph 8.1 says there are currently sufficient IPs and ISAs, and it uses the word significant, so not just so there's quite a lot of resilience in the system. But then paragraph 13.1, it says it's recommended that a further recruitment exercise is undertaken, but it doesn't say when, so I'm just assuming that was sooner rather than later.
I suspect my colleague who wrote the report just didn't adapt the conclusion from the last report, to be honest. I'm sorry for that. I think the point is that with 4 ISAs, we're back at full capacity, and were we to have a lot of complaints, which hopefully we won't, there's plenty of you to deal with it.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Any other questions, observations? Jo.
Can we just make the observation that we are now fully on board with everybody, and obviously it was quite interesting to see that we were able to fill them, because I know in the past we've struggled perhaps to get people. It's good to see that people are still interested to come forward and do the work. Thank you for volunteering.
Thanks very much, and thanks again to Anne and the team for undergoing all those recruitment procedures and for getting us on board. So that's brilliant. So that's item 7. Would we like to note the report, recruitment of independent standards assessors? Thank you. So that is now noted, and we move on to item 8, which is the complaints update report. Again, Anne.
So for new members of the committee, every meeting we will have an update on complaints, where we are, how many we've received, and a broad summary of what they're about. We don't detail complaints that have been to the committee previously, so it's only the ones since the last meeting that will be on the list. So we try to note the date the complaints were received and also the date that they were determined, so you can see how long we're taking to deal with complaints. So since the last meeting in March, there were 4 new complaints. One was determined on the basis that the conduct did not relate to council business, and of course we can only deal with complaints that relate to council business. So that was dismissed. One, very unusually, and I've never seen it before, was a self-referral by a parish councillor on the basis that he wanted the complaint system to clear his name. But after speaking to the potential complainant, they decided that they didn't want to take the matter any further, so we were unable to deal with it. The 2 further complaints, which are still in the process of being determined, one previously undetermined complaint, which was waiting on the confirmation of whether the complainant wished to proceed, and they confirmed that they did not wish to do so. I think that's all I've got to say.
Thank you very much. Any observations, Joe? Sorry.
Fine. This is quite interesting, the self-referral one, and there was a note at the side to consider whether or not we ought to have something to say how we deal with self-referral. As just been said, I've never known anybody refer themselves, but I suppose that's part of the background, is that people feel that they've been unjustifiably complained against, that they're trying to protect their own self-interest by saying, well, am I guilty of something or not? But it's an interesting case, and normally it's people doing the opposite and not wanting anybody to report them because obviously the consequences. So whether or not there is anything in other organisations across the country got anything in their policy that says anything about self-referrals?
I've never come across self-referral in all my time in local government, so we couldn't deal with it anyway, because the whole arrangement is to deal with complaints made against councillors. Until you've got a complaint, you can't go anywhere with it. So, yeah, self-referral is a no-go area, really.
Perhaps we could put something on the website to say that that's one of the things that we can't deal with. It's just that if somebody were investigating, at least it would save your time and effort in having to deal with them and tell them it's not something we can deal with. Because I'm sure that people will look on the website to see what the rules are.
That seems a very fair point. Francesca, did you want to say something?
Yes, if we're finished on that point, I wanted to understand, still to be determined. I think you might have said, I might have just not followed, but where we've got 2 complaints alleging bullying, which is a very serious allegation, and in the workplace would be taken extremely seriously. I'm not suggesting we wouldn't, but what is the process for determining, and is it different from bullying in the workplace allegations? That
is actually one of my complaints, so I do know about it. So it is a bit of an unusual one, this, but I think it boils down to a dispute between two people who were on the parish council at the time, and one of the people stepped down as a consequence of the dispute. And the trouble is that people use the complaint system to try to encompass other matters, like whether or not the parish council is behaving in accordance with its contract standing orders or its standing orders, and we don't have any jurisdiction to look at this. On this particular complaint, although it did happen in the course of council business, I've consulted an independent person, an ISA, and a parish councillor representative, Linda, who I'm still waiting to hear from. So once we've heard from them, we will make a decision, but we're not likely to investigate it. And it is the same definition as ACAS. It's the ACAS definition of bullying that we would use. But obviously the matters raised have got to be fairly significant to go to an investigation stage under the arrangements.
Is your concern, Fran, about the duration of the process, or was there something else?
It's more of understanding, really, because of the ACAS approach. I'm just interested to know if we deviate from that. Glad to hear that we don't. Why would we? So yeah, what do we do to determine the allegation? I appreciate it's a different environment, but nonetheless, happy to hear that we are following the ACAS model.
Yeah, if you look at the guidance that goes with the Code of Conduct, there's a great chunk in there about bullying and what constitutes bullying, and one incident might not amount to bullying. It might need to be a course of behaviour, for instance. So we would use that guidance. Yeah. Is there anything else I want to say about it? I think that this one we probably won't go to investigation on. It's not that serious, would be my inclination to where we are at the moment. Was there something else you said? I thought there was another point you raised, sorry. Is that it? No, okay.
Ian, thank you.
Sorry, just a question or an observation, a question regarding the self-referral point again. Earlier today, I googled Basingstoke and Dean Code of Conduct, who can make a complaint, and I didn't get an answer because I was interested to see whether or not councillors could refer themselves. So is there a document which says who can make a complaint? And the second comment regarding self-referral would be, is there any provision in the system for councillors to seek early advice, so to speak, and say, this issue has come to light, it may escalate, can I have some guidance and assistance?
So if you went onto our website and you put in councillor complaints, it will bring up a page that's got all the documents that pertain to complaints, and there's one called Arrangements for Considering Complaints Against Councillors, and that sets out how the system works. And just to sort of pick up on the question over there, I remember what the other point was. So usually when we get a complaint, we will advise the councillor who's complained about, we will write to them, we will ask for their version of events, and probably contact the clerk as well to see what they say. So the usual sort of, is it one person's word against the other? So that's the place to go. In respect of help for councillors, yeah, the independent people have a role in that. So, if I've known it happen in relation to borough councillors. So, if borough councillors are facing a complaint, they can go to an independent person who can give them advice as to what they should do. And in fact, I don't think I've ever known a borough councillor use it, but that is part of their role, to give advice to councillors. And then obviously we wouldn't use the same independent person in relation to the complaint. We'd make sure it's a different one so they weren't conflicted out.
Thank you. Jo?
I would say that the on the answer about the bullying and harassment is that the new Code of Conduct we adopted in 2022 had much more to say about that and is actually quite strong on that. And that is some of the difficulties, is that some of the older versions that some of the councillors might have had in the past didn't actually cover that aspect, which has been much more tough. Obviously, the LGA version, they have actually beefed up the information. And I think that's because perhaps more people realise that that is quite a serious allegation. And sometimes it can be affecting the staff of a council. It might be a borough council, it might be a town council, because they employ staff. So it covers a broader spectrum. If you have a look at the information on there, it is quite strong, I think.
I think also what I'd say, if you look at the actual code now, it's expressed in terms of I do not bully any person, I do not. So it's really understandable for everyone that takes on the role.
Sorry, David, and then Fran.
Thanks. Just an observation. Paragraph 4.1 seems to be an options analysis that might just have come across. Talking about an option that seems to have been ruled out.
You okay with that? 4.1?
It's a standard template paragraph in the report. You know, some councils probably don't do complaints reports, but we choose to do it because it's part of the learning comes from complaints. You know, if we see a particular cycle of the same sort of complaints, we can derive learning from that and adjust things accordingly, or make sure it's covered in training. So we might, when we're training parish councillors, for instance, we might spend more time on bullying, and respect is the other big one, and less time on abusing council resources.
Thank you. And Fran.
Thank you. I was just wanting to clarify, my questioning wasn't so much about what we have in the Code of Conduct, which is what we've all more or less signed up to, about how we conduct ourselves. It was more about how we investigate allegations and the process we follow, the timescales, etc., which you've said is we adopt the ACAS approach. So very happy with that.
Yes, we don't have rigid timescales because it can depend on a number of things, like how quickly somebody comes back to you, how quickly ISAs respond or parish council reps respond. But yeah, we basically tell the councillor affected, get his opinion as to what happened, maybe check with the clerk if it's a parish council, if there are any witnesses, and we might go as far as to ask them, but probably if it's only where it's more serious, and then, you know, use your points one way or the other, to be honest. And then, but all the time we're making the judgment, is this serious enough to launch a formal investigation? And it's actually got to be pretty serious before you do that nowadays.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, observations? Thank you. And thanks again, Anne, for what's clearly been a busy few months with the complaints. So I suggest that we note the complaints update report. Are we happy to note it as a committee? Thank you very much. Next item is item 9, which is the Standards Committee work programme for 2024-25. Do I get anyone to speak about this? Forgive me. Oh, I'm afraid I make Anne talk again. I'm sorry, Anne.
So the next meeting is November, and we have Code of Conduct Learning and Development update, and obviously we'll try to pick up the points that you've raised today and make sure that those are covered. And then the March 2025 meeting, it's the usual annual draft report. I think you considered that at your last meeting. And then we'll be into more recruitment again. And then at each meeting, we always look at complaints against councillors, any referrals from the Constitutional Working Group. So I suppose on that one is the outstanding probity in planning that you looked at the last meeting that needs to go through the Constitutional Working Group, and then we'll report back to you what they said. It also needs to go to the Development Control Committee for their comments as well before any changes to the code or council go on to adopt it. So we will bring that back to you. Updates on requests for dispensations. Well, I can't remember the last time we had a request for a dispensation from a councillor, so I'd be surprised to see that. And then any other urgent or ethical probity issues as they arise, and also responding to government guidance, regulations and consultations as issued, or if anything of interest on the subject comes out, we'll try to report that to you as well.
And Joe?
I think in the past we've actually talked about legislation that didn't actually come forward when the LGA last review in 2022, and that the government at that time were potentially looking at beefing up some of the legislation in Parliament. I take it that never happened, and one wonders if the new government are going to be concentrating on doing anything about that, because obviously they've got a very big agenda for the first year. So I think we're probably going to find that we're, inverted commas, stuck with the code of conduct as it is now, unless somebody knows any different. But there were some things that we would have liked them to have actually clarified a bit more, but it would have depended on changing legislation to give us a bit more oomph, I suppose.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it went back to a review in, I think it was as long ago as 2019 now. One of the main things was decriminalising code of conduct issues, which I think is really important actually, because it's very easy for council to inadvertently forget to report, I don't know, a change in their personal circumstances, so they've changed employers or something, or and that relates to their pecuniary interests, and in theory, that's a police issue. So, we can't investigate where their pecuniary interests involved. It becomes a police matter, and it really shouldn't be. So that was one of the issues. The other was making the code compulsory, compulsory training for clerks and getting a certificate. So a lot of these have come forward because of the LGA code, but yeah, the real important changes didn't take place. I haven't heard there's anything on the new agenda. I wouldn't imagine it would be a high priority.
Sylvia, I think you wanted to say something.
Thank you. Just for information, there was a bill passed in October 23 called the Workers' Protection Legislation Act Bill, whatever, and it applies to employment circumstances, and it puts the onus on the employer. And I realise we're not necessarily talking about an employment relationship here, but it puts the onus on the employer to prevent sexual harassment rather than deal with it afterwards by disciplinary grievance matters or whatever. And I'm not saying the code will be changed because of that, but we probably just need to be aware that sexual harassment in the workplace is coming to the fore, and will have its own legislation.
Thank you very much for that. That's very useful for us. Any other comments or observations? So, excuse me, I suggest we note the work programme for 2024-25. Has everyone agreed? Thank you. So we're now on to, item 10, which is the exclusion of press and public, if we need to consider anything confidential, which we don't, in which case I think, unless anyone has anything else to raise, we've reached the end of the meeting. Happy? Fantastic. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you especially to Anne and Phil. Thank you.